welcome to Journeys into the Soul bonus content. So glad you joined us. I'm here with Marti. She had an amazing session, and her episode is called Just Be. You can find it on the website. You can find it on Amazon Prime in the United States. And I'm joined here with Marti today. Marti, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, David. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. It's been some time since your session. Give me your perspective on all of the things that you encountered. There's been some time since then. Kind of what's the catch up? What's the follow up? You had a profound journey, and I know that you've done these before. So kind of catch me up on how it's been going for you.
Since I had my quantum consciousness session with Diana, there have been changes in my life. I found my life's work. So I enrolled in a quantum consciousness facilitation course with Pete Smith.
I want to ask a couple questions because I love Pete. I love his methodology. In fact, his book was part of the footage that we filmed. You were actually reading through his book. Um,
Yeah,
I give someone who's never heard about quantum consciousness, give a little presence to Pete and his methodology that he's doing.
Pete Smith is author of Quantum Consciousness, which grew out of his experiences as a psychotherapist with the Michael Newton Institute, having studied past life experiences and life between lives experiences. He, listening to Newton's work and his case studies, realized that there's more to this. And as it evolved for him, it became a real focus for him to the extent that he incorporated all of this into the Quantum Consciousness Institute and started working that way with folks who came to him. Actually, he was asked by a lot of the folks he was working with at the time to set up a facilitation coursework for people interested in quantum consciousness. And then it began to expand. It went not only quantum consciousness, but all the way to universal consciousness. I had the privilege of doing the facilitation course with Pete. And oh my gosh, only this happens in things where you just follow your curiosity and do it. I ended up meeting all these people all over the world that were also part of this. That's the most interesting part. As a matter of fact, one of the Australian young gals, she's 38 years old. She's young enough to be a grandchild to me. And she's one of my best friends. How does that happen in this world? Not likely.
That's
Anyway,
so fun.
by having completed the coursework, I now do my own facilitations.
Beautiful.
And I love it. I just love the work. I love it because I expand in my consciousness when I've got a client who's with me and their consciousness begins to expand. And the two of us go on the journey together.
Yeah.
It's just, there's nothing, well, for me, there's nothing like it.
Yeah. And there's always something there to learn and gain when you hear another person's perspective and what their experience is. You're like, wow, that is really interesting. And it informs your own journey, and it's just so beautiful.
Like the biggest change I feel that this work has brought me is a real deep love for myself. And like every other human being walking around in the world, I've had my challenges, I've had my sadness, and I've had, as much as any of us have. But now I know that I'm deeply loved in a way I never thought was possible.
Having the understanding that we're all coming from a place of love is so important. And that's what I loved about your session was you just had this sense and this feeling when you were complete with the journey that you're like, wow, I don't have to be the good girl anymore. I can just be. And I went, oh, that's a beautiful title for your episode. Just be.
Yeah. Most of my life, I've been doing good girl instead of doing is who we're not human beings, we're human doings most of the time. And
Yeah.
when we're in that place of not doing, it's like, oh God, what am I supposed to do now? Nothing.
Yeah, that epiphany that you didn't have to do anything to earn love. I loved how Diana took you through these different ages, and you talked to 21-year-old Marty, and you kind of felt like you had failed. And then she said, well, go back and have 76-year-old Marty talk to 21-year-old Marty. And you're like, girl, we're going to go on such a great ride. Oh, I just loved your perspective as your 76-year-old self was talking to your 21-year-old self. You're like, this is going to be crazy. Let's get this thing started. And you're like, yeah, don't worry about it. And do you have a perspective on that?
It's all true.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, to reach this point in my life, I'm sure there's a point in the lives of all us elder folk where you come to I don't know if other people have this. I don't really know. I haven't asked many people about it, but it seems to me there's a reckoning moment that sort of starts to make itself known to you that I did the best I could.
yeah,
I did what I did because that was all I really could imagine doing at that point. There was no consciousness about the life I was living particularly. So from this perspective to go back and see my life from a conscious point of view, it gives me great empathy for the hard, tough times that I went through. And to say, you're going to reach a point, kiddo, where you're going to say, oh, oh my gosh, if I hadn't had that experience, I would not be this woman.
mm,
And I think she's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. And I loved how you had your 40-year-old self, and you were kind of coming into your own. You were going back to school to do dance therapy. Something happened with the schooling where it was no longer available, and you had to go through these frustration times. But even in that, you were receiving a lesson, if you will. You met Wayne, and that was the part of the episode where you were frustrated because you felt like you had somebody you could really give yourself to, work with. You'd found the love of your life, and then because of an infidelity, it had shattered your world, and that shattering was what opened you up to a new epiphany.
It was an opportunity to finally find out who Marty really was. And living alone and doing that exploration out of necessity really was the growth that blossomed through the quantum consciousness work, where everything in my life came together, where I think I maybe even at one point described this to you, David, when I realized that this was my life's work, something that I'd looked for all my life, right?
Hmm.
I wanted to know what my purpose was. What am I doing here?
Yeah,
And as I wove together all of the experiences of my life, my dance, my marriages, my children, my life experiences, they were like strings that all came together and held together by the knowledge, the love, and the understanding that without that, I would not have this work that I have now that is a full expression of who I am.
yeah. There's so much that happens in a session. In your session in particular, you got to go to some really cool kind of far out space. I didn't have time to include that because I love the message of, you didn't have to do anything, just being, you were loved. And I felt like that was such a beautiful message. So thank you for that. Would you like to share a little bit about some of the other things that came up for you? Let people know that this was indeed a very multi-dimensional experience for you across quantum consciousness.
I felt after I viewed the session that you had put together, that it, as you just mentioned, it's a whole. For me, it was the ex complete expanded space. I disappear. I mean, the ego and the body and all of that just sort of disappeared into in my mind, and I haven't listened to it in a long time, David, but in my mind now, as I go back through it, I see just grainy sand. I don't know how to explain it. It's as if Marty didn't exist. It was just pure consciousness.
Mm.
Yeah. And I was there in the outer realms with all that has and does inform me when I'm in a deep meditative place. And it's where my guides are.
You had that deep presence. Speaking of your guides, you had that soul wisdom, this ancient wisdom, and I wasn't sure if you were embodying that or if there was a guide that was embodying that, but it was coming from your subconscious, this deep wisdom of you didn't mess up. These are all experiences to inform you that led you to that place of this knowing that the love you'd looked for all your life was really inside of you. Do you want to give presence to that deep wisdom, kind of give some clarity on that?
That deep wisdom showed up in Egypt
Mm.
in an experience I had in the King's, known at an area called the King's Chamber. The guide that took us there is, I hate to use the word shaman, but he lives in both places. He
Mm.
lives here, he lives there. That's who he has been. That's who he is on this in this world. So I was in this huge stone box, and the other members of the group were chanting around me. And as I was lying there on my back, all of a sudden, oh boy, this is hard to talk about. The presence of a woman who said her name was Sophia came, and she opened my chest and took out my heart. And she held it up and then very gently and with love replaced it and closed up the wound. And it was as if my heart was cleansed. It was showered in this love of inexplicable golden light. You know, my sister came to me too. My sister recently passed, and my sister had Alzheimer's, although she still knew who I was before she passed. And by the time she passed, this remarkable situation occurred. And before I tell you that, let me give you a little of my background. I've been a hospice nurse. I've done a lot of work on death and dying, and it was an exploration born out of an 18-year-old who lost her father, me, and having looked for him all my life. Anyway, so my sister, before she passed, I had seen her and spent some time with her. And there was nothing but pure love, pure love between the two of us at that point. And it was evident to me the experience of having seen her face, in which there was this glow all about her, and her turning and looking at me, and I knew it was unconditional love from a sister that she's much older than I, and I always wanted her to love me, to be my friend and all those things. And never had that from her until then. And so when she passed, there was no sadness.
Mm,
There was no regret. There was nothing that wasn't pure love. So I never grieved her.
mm. These are profound spaces that we get to in these hypnosis sessions, and whatever comes up is always there to inform us. I all the time people are like, was it real? Was I really just in a past life? And whether or not the is it real question, more so than that is what was real was the experience that you were having, and the messages you received, and the clarity and the healing and the meaning. You know, give us a kind of a summary of your overall experience, and if someone were questioning whether or not they should have their own session, what would you say to that person?
Well, my first question always to people is, what brings you to this work?
Mm,
What's your curiosity about this? What do you want to know? That starts the conversation, especially with people who are interested in doing a facilitated journey. And when they say to me, well, I'm really not sure. I've read a little bit of book about this, and I think I want to know more. My experience in having doing these is pretty much the same. I had a curiosity about this, and I I have this mantra that I tell my kids all the time, which is follow your curiosity and your intuition will lead the path. That's what launched me into this. And then the synchronicity of, oh, yeah, I used to believe this, and now I believe that, and this, and how things began to sort of build on top of each other. And as I gave you the illustration of the strings of my life coming together, a moment in time where you realize that you are about to step into something that will change your life, and it will be whatever it needs to be for you on your intuitive path. And let's just see where it goes.
mm, that's beautiful. Well, I appreciate you sharing your experience with me today. And uh, before we close up, is there anything else you want people to know? Do you have information that popped up while we were talking? Is there anything else that you feel was left unsaid?
Stay on the path is like embroidered on my heart. As long as I stay on the path, this path of intuition and curiosity, anything that I need to know will come my way and be for the greater good,
Yeah.
for me and the people around me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for the conversation today, and sharing some of the insights, some of the extra stuff. Thank you so much for being willing to share your journey on camera. It's a very sacred space for me to be able to facilitate the showing of what Dr. Diana Paque and you created that day. And I take it very serious to make sure that I'm holding that space with love, and sharing things. There were personal things that come up, and I was like, yeah, we probably don't want to share those, because your heart was very open and they were very personal things. But the powerful messages that came through, I just thought so poignant and so relevant to all of us. The experience you had of going through a lifetime, having some longevity behind you. I love that you weren't some 20-year-old young person that was just like, oh, I'm just starting out. You've got this longevity of life to look over. And what a beautiful experience to be able to share with people, to say, I've lived 76 plus years, and these are the lessons that I've found. Don't be so hard. Don't on yourself. Don't worry. It's all going to work out. That was one of the messages. Stay on the path. It's going to be just fine. And ultimately, you found a connection for you in being a facilitator. I just think the whole thing was so beautiful. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, David. It's been my pleasure.